not going to fly you somewhere. You're not going to go. But there's a doubleheader in Phoenix, 2 rematches. Emmanuel Navarrete against Oscar Valdez. Like I've told you on past shows, Emmanuel Navarrete's one of my favorite fighters. I love Emmanuel Navarrete, but his last 2 fights, a draw, okay, against Robinson Canseco, and then he lost to Dennis Berinchik, close decision, moving up in weight to lightweight. He went back down to junior lightweight. He looked like his old self. He looked fantastic, Emmanuel Navarrete. He was bouncing in and out. He was so fluid. The jabs were coming. He's a volume puncher. Poor Oscar Valdez, who at one time they were trying to build him up to be a major star. And Valdez, no one has more of a heart than Oscar Valdez. No one. And he gave it all he had. He was overwhelmed until he was knocked out with a body shot in the 6th round, was knocked down twice along the way. And I hate to say it, Oscar Valdez now with that loss, I hate to use the term for a guy like Oscar Valdez. He's more a gatekeeper now. I mean, I can't call him a serious contender because this was his chance after losing a decision to Navarrete a year ago, saying he'll make the adjustments. It just
he's not a fighter. That's not who he is, though.
Yeah,
he's not a fighter that can really tweak a whole lot. He's got to be a volume puncher and be able to overwhelm you. And when he can't get in on you, and granted, I didn't see the fights. I was in a wedding Saturday, but I did see the highlight of that fight, and it just looked to me like he just couldn't get in or get anything done. And the price he had to pay to try to get in was too high.
Yeah, but the big story of the night was Rafael Espinoza defending his WBO featherweight title against 2-time Olympic gold medalist Robozy Ramirez. And Ramirez, he's won titles, but he hasn't turned out to be the star they hoped he was. He beat Shakur Stevenson for the gold medal, 2 for second of the 2 gold medals. And last time they fought, it was a grueling fight. Espinoza won at the end of the fight. He knocked down Ramirez, pulled out a close decision. Espinoza had a 7-inch height advantage. Talk about a freak of nature. You mentioned Bob Foster. This guy stands 6'1" as a featherweight. Talk about
that's amazing.
Talk about a freak of nature. Okay, but the thing about it is too. So Ramirez is very coy, trying to box from the outside, getting down low, the way Roy Jones does, in that kind of stance that Roy Jones does. And Espinoza starts picking up the pace. At the end of 5 rounds, Ramirez is up 48-47 on 2 of the cards. He's actually ahead on 2 of the cards. And then Espinoza, 12 seconds, it ends into round 6, shockingly. He hits him a straight left to the eye, a straight right to the eye. I don't remember which hand. And Ramirez all of a sudden waves his hand the way Duran did against Leonard. No mas. And it's like over. And he took a good shot in the eye, don't get me wrong. But Joe Tessitore mentioned it best, after he has every right to pull himself out of the fight. Any fighter has an absolute right, because a lot of times the doctors won't do it, their corner won't do it. I'm not against the fighter looking out for themselves. But if you really want to dare to be great, you are going to push it to the limits. How far you're willing to go. I never condemn a fighter who's not willing to push it to the limit. So there had to be a point after 5 rounds, Frank. Ramirez must have thought, I'm not going to beat this guy, or he remembered the last fight and he didn't want to put himself through hell the last 7 rounds.
Without seeing the fight, based on what you've conveyed, I would agree with that's probably what happened. But Jack, the point, just remember this though. That is what separates the greats from the near greats. And that's why not everybody is great, and that's why there are near greats, outstanding fighters, but that part where like they can just go. You know, just like Ali and Manila, they can just find that one more gear and go. That's why we revere these guys and they're legends, because not everybody can do that.
Yeah, but you know what? The public becomes unforgiving, Frank. If a fighter quits in a corner sometimes, it's more acceptable than him quitting during a round. A lot, I was watching a tape. As you know, I'm writing a book on Michael Spinks, and I was watching his fight with Stefan.
Never heard of him.
You sparred him a number of times. Stefan Tangstedt, okay?
Right.
And I didn't recall the fight, but I had to watch the tape of it again, study it out. And when it came time, Tangstedt was knocked down. Richard Steele would ask him, do you want to continue? First up, a referee should never ask a fight if you want to continue.
Yeah, he puts him in a bad spot.
In a very bad spot, because fighters are trained to be valiant. They don't want to say no. That they'd rather be pulled out and then act like, oh, I wanted to go on, but the ref pulled me out. Let them save their dignity. Tangstedt mumbled like he didn't want. That's enough. Very mumbled in an audible way, because it was the second time he was knocked down. The first time he didn't want to give in and say that's enough, even though you sensed he wanted the fight stop. But with Hammer Ramirez, there was no warning. If I was a referee, Frank, it never would have crossed my mind to stop the fight. That's the thing. That's what was so shocking about it.
It's funny how people will they'll call a guy like that. They'll come down on him for quitting. Let me ask you this. Did George Chuvalo quit against Joe Frazier?
Great point. That crossed my mind, Frank. Fantastic point. What happened, it happened suddenly. He took a shot in the eye, Chuvalo. That's the worst place to get hit, I think. Right squarely in the eye.
Frazier broke his eye socket, which he said was from the fight before.
But you want to know something, Frank? If someone waved it was all over, and then we found out their eye socket was broken, I think even the people that booed maybe would be forgiving afterwards if they.
Well, that happened to Cal Brook twice.
Yeah. Okay. Or like with Jerry Quarry and Joe Frazier, the second fight. Quarry had enough. At one point, he waved to Joe Louis enough. That's fair. Or Carlos Ortiz at the end of 6 rounds against Ken Buchanan. It broke my heart to hear the Garden crowd boo him because he retired on the stool. But Ortiz said, I was exhausted. I was scared I'd get hurt. I didn't want to get knocked out. I was scared I would get hurt. To me, that's good enough.
And Jack, what's good enough for me is if the fighter in question can go home and look himself in the mirror that night and say, I did the best I could. There was nothing left to give, and it wouldn't change the outcome. Just like when I went to see Aguayo and Pryor fight the rematch, and I watched Aguayo sit there, and the referee counted him out, and my buddy just said, he's this, that, or the other. He quit, and I, you've heard me say this countless times. I said he didn't quit. I said he lost his 1%. That 1% belief he had that he could still pull the fight out. And at that point, when Pryor sat Aguayo down the second time in the fight, or maybe it was the third, I'm not sure, but Pryor realized if I get up, he will only put me back here again. And maybe if he keeps putting me here, I'm going to get hurt really bad. I've given it my best. There's nothing more to give. He's the better man. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% that point. There were a couple other fights. Richardson Hitchens beat Liam Paro. Okay,
that was on the ESPN card.
Welterweight bout. No, that was on the Zone. That was from Puerto Rico. The 2 fights I mentioned, Navarrete Valdez and Espinosa Ramirez, doubleheader, which is very nice doubleheader by, even though they're both rematches they fought before. That was a nice, double dip with that. And Hitchinson, I just saw the highlights of that. a few of the rounds. And Hitchinson, he came up fighting for the PBC, fighter from Brooklyn. He looked good beating Liam Paro, who beat Cerbriel Mateus, in a little bit of an upset before that. And then there was a fight, a couple of old war horses. Now, Frank, you're going to have to look it up whether the ring announcer was legitimate in what he said. He said it was for the WBA heavyweight title. I can't believe, now Kurbet Pulev is a world champion. Come on. Don't tell me the winner, Fury Usyk, will have an excuse not to have the rubber match. If it's Fury or if it's Usyk, instead of fighting Daniel Dubois again, if it's Usyk, he says, oh no, I got to fight Pulev. I want to unify the titles. He fought Manuel Shaw. But I will say this for the two old war horses. They went at it, Frank. It was a
good fight.
Good fight. 12 rounds, full distance. It was in Bulgaria. Pulev is a national hero there, which is interesting point that I made before about the Hall of Fame. I'd never vote for him for the Hall of Fame, but in Bulgaria, he's a national hero. So if I was going to make an argument for his name ever getting on the ballot, that would be it. In his country, he's a superstar.
Someday, Jack, though, well, no, maybe not, because it's probably been tried, but like to define what a Hall of Famer is, because it's different to everybody.
You just put an idea in my head, Frank. It's probably came up before. Why don't we have a World Cup in boxing? The best fight in a weight class, a particular weight class from a number of countries, get 16 countries and have the tournament, the World Cup. Heavyweights would be the best thing. Everyone comes out with their best heavyweight. Every country. Some guys would have very little to no chance, but it might be a little fun.
And Jack, speaking of that, and I've touched on this before, next weekend we're going to preview the Fury Usyk fight in depth. And again, I've been thinking there's a lot more on the line in that fight than just the rematch. I actually believe the winner of that fight will lay claim to being the best heavyweight of the post-Klitschko era, which encompasses the last 9.5 years. And if Fury wins, it has to go to him because he will have defeated everybody. He will have held the title the longest. And I just think that if he wins that, it'll show us two things, that he really was the best guy, and the fact that we've never seen him coming off a loss going into a major fight. And I am very, very encapsulated by how he handles that. How will he react to that? Because I hear he's going to come in light. I hear he's going to come in heavy. How does he go against that scenario with a guy who proved he could knock him out? The guy could hurt him, had quicker hands, and is the better technician. I want to see how Fury adjusts to that. And Jack, if he wins, he's got to get the props.
Frank, I think you're the only one who thinks post-Klitschko era. Maybe they're thinking of their legacy. I get the feeling, believe it or not, Fury's maybe thinking more of his legacy than Usyk is. I think Usyk has such tunnel vision to win the fight. He's not distracted by, oh, what's my legacy going to be? So focused on just winning the fight and doing what he has.
Jack, I agree with that, but I still think that argument is out there because if we go back, we had the 60s and 70s. We had Ali, Foreman, and Frazier. The 80s.
You say post.
The 80s, we had Tyson and Holmes. The 90s, we had Lewis, Bowe, Holyfield. And then we had, after Lennox Lewis retired in 2003, the Klitschko's owned the division from 2004 to 2015. Well, now we're 10 years out from that. Who's the best post-Klitschko heavyweight will be decided. Yes, there's more on the line, but I think, Jack, when you're the best heavyweight of your era, everybody considers you an all-time great. Name an era where the best heavyweight of that era didn't go down as a great.
Okay, you open up this for conversation, okay? And your opinion is probably the same as mine. But there are rumors out there, and you get the feeling there's some validity to it because he's really been thinking about it. Klitschko coming back. And part of his motivation, a large part, he wants another go at Fury, who he doesn't like personally, who he kind of wants to set the record straight with. I think he's too far gone. I thought he was past his peak before he lost to Fury. Seeing him up point.
I agree.
Things at the Garden. But if Klitschko came back, he'd never fight Usyk, his countryman, who he's fond of. But if he came back, and if Fury beat Usyk, and if Klitschko came back and beat Fury and regained the title at an old age, does that maybe make him a top 5 heavyweight of all time, number 5, considering he had some 20 title defenses?
I don't know about that, Jack, but I know one thing. It bodes real well for him historically. Some of the old timers won't want to hear that, but it will. But Jack, I can't see that happen. I know he wants to break Foreman's record. I can't see that happening. I can't see him beating Fury now. He's too far. Think about this. He lost to Joshua 8 years ago. Hasn't fought since. His body still looks good, and he stays in shape, but we both know that means nothing. That's a mirage.
Yeah, I know. I agree. You posted, speaking of heavyweights, this story I got a kick out of. If you could tell us when you were waiting at Joe Frazier's gym with Tex Cobb. Why don't you, for the people who didn't see the post, I kind of like that story.
All right, it's a couple weeks after Tex Cobb beats a journeyman at the Spectrum named Zach Ferguson. Frazier's gym usually opened around 12 o'clock in the afternoon. But, some of us would get there early, 11:30, quarter to 12. So it's myself, Charles Singleton, and Cobb. It's about 20 of 12. We're waiting for George Benton to come in. Charles Singleton and I are sitting on the ring steps talking, and Tex Cobb is getting antsy. He's throwing punches in the air. He's throwing round kicks. And all of a sudden, he sees the big heavy bag at the gym, and he goes in and he starts whacking it with head-level round kicks with pointy cowboy boots on. Well, Joe Frazier, who was not there that often, comes stumbling in, not stumbling, but just, strutting in, sunglasses, suit, briefcase. Hello, gentlemen, what it look like? As he's walking up to his office, to the left, he sees Tex Cobb kicking the bag. And he goes, Big Tex, he goes, what are you doing? He goes, you're kicking my bag. He goes, you're going to rip it. And real calmly, Tex goes, Joe, I've been kicking this bag for 2 years, and it hasn't ripped yet. And Frazier goes, come on, man. He goes, you're going to rip the bag. And Tex says, Joe, if I rip it, I'll pay for it and replace it. And with that, Frazier walked up to his office, Cobb threw 2 more kicks, and then walked over and joined me and Charles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they got along, Tex and Joe, I would hope.
Right. But when he said, Joe, I've been kicking this for 2 years and it hasn't ripped, Frazier didn't know what to say.
Yeah, well, he said he was going to pay. He would have made good on it, right, Tex, had he ripped it?
Frazier got a kick out of Cobb, and they had some funny conversations at different times. But that's one of the memories, and I've been posting them, Jack, because as you know, they may demolish that gym. And I'm not happy about that because I had a lot of fun, made some friends, learned a lot, and have some great memories of some things that happened in that gym.
Yeah, we're going to have to go, but let me just close. Michael Spinks said Joe Frazier's gym was his second home. He loved it there. It was like a second home to him. Okay?
You told me that last week, Jack. You know what? I really like that because that made me feel that what I was feeling and going through at that time, it just had that feel. And Michael Spinks lived there for a while, late 70s, early 80s, with his 78 silver anniversary Corvette.
Okay, Frank, a lot of fun. Next week, we'll fully analyze the Fury-Usyk fight, and we're going to go out on a limb with predictions, unlike your friends who like to give their predictions after the fight's over. But see you next week.
But we don't do that.
No, we don't do that. See you